Want some water?
Is there water?
I think there's a
Good
bottle.
evening. My name is Judy Mills. I'm a member of St. Andrew's Episcopal Church, and I'd like to welcome you to tonight's event. Whether you're here in person or watching this online, we're glad that you're here, and we look forward to a lively panel discussion tonight. For over a year, St. Andrew's has been working to educate ourselves on the issue of housing inequity. We've learned that it's very difficult for Black and Brown families to acquire their own homes, both here in Madison and throughout the nation. This results in a large gap in intergenerational wealth between white families and families of color. St. Andrew's is committed to assist groups working to combat housing inequity. Tonight, we're delighted to host a panel discussion on this issue. We have Sarah Alvarado and Tiffany Malone with us, the co-founders of Ownit, a group that is working to address housing inequity in Madison. Also on the panel are Jody Pope, a homeowner who has benefited from the work of Ownit, and Donna McDowell, a St. Andrew's parishioner who recently sold her home and donated some of the proceeds to Ownit. The moderator for the panel is Grace Trewartha, a board member at Ownit. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Grace.
Hi, everybody. Welcome. I'd just like to take a minute to thank Andy and Judy and all of the other folks from St. Andrew's who have helped us put on this event. My name is Grace Trewartha. As Judy said, I'm a board member of Ownit. I'm also a financial educator and created the curriculum for Ownit for the participants who come through our program. So I'm really glad to have all of you join us, both in person and online. And I'm gonna allow our panelists to introduce themselves, and hopefully we'll have a discussion about the history of Ownit, how it came to be where it is today, and also how the community and others here can help with our work. So I'll turn it over to Sarah now.
Hi, my name is Sarah Alvarado. I'm one of the co-creators of Ownit, and I also own the brokerage Alvarado Real Estate Group with my husband, and I've been in real estate 20 plus years, grew up in Madison, and I'm incredibly passionate about the work that we're doing and the opportunity for us to expand what we know, because a lot of what we need to know is not what we're taught and what we're exposed to. So I'm really grateful that you all have invited us here tonight.
Hello, my name is Jody Pope, and I am a homeowner. Thank you. And am eternally grateful for Ownit, and purchased my first home in late October, and not only benefited from the grant, the $15,000 grant, but from the educational piece. I revisited my budget last week from, that was a part of the educational information that was given to us, but I had a conflict tonight, which was part of the information that was given to us as well from Project Home, how as a homeowner we can, I think tonight's session was about drywall, how to hang drywall and how to fix certain things in your home. So I'm benefiting, again, not only from the financial piece, but from the educational piece.
Hello, everybody. My name is Tiffany Malone. I am the co-creator of Ownit, Building Black Wealth. I'm also a real estate consultant at Alvarado Real Estate Group, and I grew up here in the Madison, Middleton area. I've been here for a very long time, and I am passionate about this movement because I come from a single-family home, and I know what it feels like not to have a permanent residence and to grow up without the proper tools in regards to financial literacy and how to own things and how to build credit.
I'm Donna McDowell, and I've been a member of this parish for about 35 years. And I have participated in the outreach committee in a variety of capacities. And I have to say I've gotten tired of bringing groceries to the food pantry. And when the opportunity to work on something as substantial as building Black wealth and enabling people of color to purchase homes in Madison came along, it was something I really felt would be worth my time and effort. You don't want me to talk about my story now?
Yeah, we can talk about that a little bit later. That's fine.
Yeah, that's
I
what I
just wanted
thought.
just a chance to introduce yourself.
Yeah.
Thank you. So I think I'd like to start off with some statistics. You know, we know that there is quite a large gap between black and white homeowners in the U.S. in general. I believe the last figures that I saw, white homeownership rate was about 72%, black homeownership rate was about 44%. In Dane County, the rate of black homeownership is actually much worse than that. It's only about 15%. And I'm curious, you know, Tiffany and Sarah, you know, in the industry, you know, and maybe you can relate this to kind of how Ownit started. Why do you think there's an even greater gap locally in the rates of white to black homeownership? And either of you can.
I think that in the Madison area, the amount of white homeowners and in the population in general, the income levels are significantly higher. So the gap in wealth and opportunity is drastic. So the prices of homes are really high. And I also think that racism plays a huge part in what our industry looks like. The majority of realtors are white, the majority of lenders and bankers and insurance agents, like it's a very white-dominated industry. And so if you don't know people, you don't necessarily get connected to what's possible.
Yeah.
Just to piggyback off of that, I'd say the historical context behind home ownership, trauma, and resources play a big part of it. If black and brown people aren't comfortable with the average white person or know how to communicate with them or feel comfortable explaining to them what situation they're in financially, it's hard to get anywhere. So if nobody explains anything to you and explain simple things in regards to money or credit, you'll probably just turn around and do what you've been doing, and that leads to the same thing of renting and being in the same spot you were in prior to that. So I think that plays a role, and I think understanding that there's a reason why the home ownership rate is so low in regards to black and brown families to white families is because the systems that are put in place have been to explicitly deny black and brown people loans. So that plays a role in it. And I think that if you don't understand it, you'll just think that, hey, home ownership wasn't meant for me, which is completely not true. So I think that that's like a broader subject, and that plays a role in all of this.
Was there a particular moment or event where you realized you wanted to do something about that dynamic, about that reality on the ground?
I think there's a word for it, or that they call it. I don't remember, but do you know how like you can read something or see a video and you can totally relate or feel what this person is feeling? So I would think that I would say at a very young age, I knew that I wanted to help people. That's probably why I went to school for human services, but I didn't know how I would help people. And then as I got older and I probably immersed myself in different areas or subjects, and I seen how black and brown people were treated compared to white people, or just in regards to applying for jobs or applying for apartments or anything, or knowing certain things, it was just completely different. So instead of just sitting back and just looking at it or letting it happen to me, I thought that I would want to try to repair something. And then all the police brutality, it's just everything, right? We can't just sit back and not do anything. So instead of being a spectator, I wanted to be a leader.
Yeah. And so when this program was created, can you maybe, Sarah, describe just the general broad contours of it and exactly how it works?
The contours of it. So Yeah, well, I'm gonna tell a little of the origin story as to why and how it got to where it is, because that's like we created it out of the need for what didn't exist to some extent. Carlos and I were specifically looking for a way that our brokerage, we were doing our own work, and we had read the book The Color of Law, which I highly recommend to anyone.
It's excellent.
It's mind-blowing. And so to have been in real estate for, at that time, 10 years, and to have not known, I felt not only embarrassed, but I felt like I'd been robbed of what I should know if I'm in real estate. Like, why isn't our education surrounded by this within our association? So we were like, well, what can we do? We looked at our book of business. A lot of it was white, and a lot of it was Latino. My husband's Mexican. But when you read the books and you understand some of the history, 100% of Black people were explicitly denied through the covenants and restrictions. So like some covenants and restrictions would include Jewish or no Irish, et cetera, but 100% of them nationwide explicitly acknowledge no Black people. And so the anti-Blackness in the industry and the fact that our book of business within our brokerage was not matching what the demographics are, and that was troubling. So what we actually wanted to do was to contribute a portion of our revenue annually to an organization that was addressing the problem, because we're selling real estate. We don't know how to desegregate neighborhoods, but we knew that we could at least contribute financially. So we were like, well, we'll contribute financially. So that's when we started looking for organizations that we felt could address specifically home ownership for Black and brown families. And we couldn't find any, to be quite honest. Down payment assistance programs, there's a number of them. The majority are federally funded, and anytime you have a federally funded assistance program, when it comes to money, there's a long list of restrictions. And Carlos and I, having been in real estate, we knew how challenging it was to actually present offers to sellers when there was a down payment assistance contingency on that offer. So can I get into the weeds a little bit?
Totally.
Okay.
So contingencies meaning
Contingent, so like when you get an offer, you've got price, you've got an inspection contingency, you have a financing contingency. And you might have 3 offers on the table. They might be all the same price, but if one of them has 20% down and another has 3% down, just that, a realtor might say, well, this one's riskier because it's not 20%. So money speaks. And then when you put a down payment assistance contingency on it, oh no, like it literally is named a risky offer. So where historically we used to have risky neighborhoods when we were redlining, which was the government's way of, that was based on race. Redlining was based on race. Neighborhoods were redlined, and the appraisal industry was based on race. So to get to now, where now we have offers that are riskier because of financial aspects of it. And when you look at up until 1968, when you could explicitly deny people based on their race, and then as of 1968, now you can't discriminate. But there's no way of explicitly funding people who have been denied the opportunity. And we all know how real estate works in terms of wealth accumulation. It's massive.
It's a very good.
Massive.
In the U.S., it is probably the best way of building wealth for most middle-income families.
Right.
Primarily due to the 30-year mortgage and that ability to pay off the debt against the house over a very long period of time.
And between the
forced savings, basically.
Right. Mm-hmm. Between the 1930s and the 1950s, $120 billion of money was lent through the homeownership and the GI Bill and FHA. 98% of that went to white homeowners. So you can imagine the amount of wealth, right, as it accumulates. So now the wealth gap is not decreasing. Since 1968, it has increased, the wealth gap. So we knew that it's not just a matter of, we don't discriminate. We need to specifically be funding in the same way that white families can gift money down through.
And there is a ton of wealth transfer happening
Right.
every day in families from one generation to the next. That's accumulated over
Right.
time.
So we were like, why can't down payment assistance programs be offered to families, and primarily families okay, this is the other thing with down payment assistance programs, you can't discriminate, therefore you can't make it explicit for Black and brown families. So a lot of white people take advantage of the down payment assistance programs. So when you are funding those, you're not necessarily funding Black and brown families the opportunities. So we had a lot of issues with a lot of the down payment programs, as you can see. And we were like, okay, maybe we need to go in and try and change those. But changing federally funded anything is like not in our wheelhouse. We're entrepreneurs.
Not yet.
I mean, we can try pushing, et cetera, and we're loud about it. So I think that's one of the things. We're a private sector, privately funded organization. We do not take money from the government, because if they're going to tell us how people can use and not use that money, that's for us what we're against. Like we stand for trusting the families that we're giving this money to.
So how did you eventually get around the fair housing restrictions?
What a great question. The fair housing issue is a big one, and so because we couldn't just make a fund that was for Black and brown families, we partnered with One City Schools. And we have hopes of partnering with other organizations strategically so that the money can go to Black and brown families. So One City Schools is a charter school in Madison. 85% of their families are families of color.
It is open to all.
And so when we say this Ownit program is available to all families in one city,
That's right.
it is so that we are in compliance. So we're definitely in compliance. Anyone can join and anyone can apply for the grant.
Yeah, my youngest son actually attended One City for a year.
Yeah. So that's how we got around the fair housing issue. And then the second issue was, how do we make sure that the families can have the money and not have a contingency on their offer? And that was just working with really smart people within the lending institution. So we have an account. Once they are awarded the grant, we have to call it a grant. We would like to call it a gift, because we'd like to mirror communities gifting in the way that white family is gifted down. But the grant then is earmarked in the name of the potential homeowner. So they have 9 months, and the bank sees that money because it's earmarked for them, and they don't have to have that contingency on their offer. So last year in a market that was really, really, and even today, it's like the market is tough. You're talking about 20 offers on a table. So you can imagine that if you have a down payment assistance contingency, you're automatically not in the running. With this opportunity, we had 8 families close last year, and they were competing. They were competing offers, but they could compete, and so that's the differentiator with how it works.
Yeah, and I think we're thrilled with that. I at the beginning, I would have been happy if we had one family move into the home, and in 2 years, we've gotten 8 families in. So Jody being one of them. So I think that definitely deserves a round of applause. So in terms of the program itself, it's affiliated with One City Schools. All families who have children enrolled there can participate in the program. All alumni, if you've left the school for whatever reason, they can participate in the program. And essentially, it's 2 parts. So maybe, Tiffany, can you maybe go through the 2 elements in the program? And also, I know you've worked with some of those 8 buyers, and maybe you can talk a little bit about their experience, and then we can talk to Jody directly here.
It's staff too. Staff can apply.
And staff, excuse me, yes, staff. Our first buyer was actually
a teacher.
A teacher.
Speech.
A speech therapist in the program. Was our first homeowner.
Kelsey. So prior to the start of each class, we send out emails to the families and the staff of One City, and we blast it all over the place, and you can sign up. So participants who sign up, there's like an orientation, and we tell them everything that we've told you, and we want you to be a homeowner if you haven't been a homeowner within the past 3 years. Literally, it's education and there's money. So you go through an education portion of the program, and you are taught everything in regards to the historical context behind home ownership. You're introduced to realtors, lenders.
Talk a lot about credit building.
We talk a lot about credit building with local lenders. We talk about budgeting with Grace. and she teaches us how to budget and looks at all of our finances. And
Yeah, the course is actually, the first course is actually framed as a wealth building course. It's not actually explicitly about home ownership because, as we know, there's actually many different ways to build wealth. Some of it is through home ownership. That's a really great way in America to do it. But there's also entrepreneurship. There's just investing in other companies through, say, stocks and bonds. So there's lots of different options because we want, we don't want to just say, you have to buy a home or this is the only way. I think we've been around the business long enough to remember that there was a period where homes and certain mortgages could be a millstone for a family. And so we very much focus on wealth building, and with home ownership, how does that look? What kinds of products, what kinds of mortgages, what kinds of homes do you want to get into? We want to help with that decision making.
And some families will go through the actual program and not even purchase a home, but they'll just go through for the informational purposes alone. Or maybe they'll go through the program and maybe purchase a home 2 years later. But we are in agreement that home ownership isn't for everybody. Some people just want a stable home and good credit and want to learn the tools to be able to attain that. And that's okay. We're not trying to pressure anybody, but we know that owning a home, how much wealth it is in owning a home from everyday people.
Yeah. So maybe Jody, you can talk a little bit about, you've gone through the course, and would love to hear how you think it kind of made a difference to have it as part of your home ownership journey.
I think for me, I was in the process of venturing out for home ownership, and then I learned about Ownit. And so I attended the 8-week course, and for me it was sitting with the information and helping better my position to be able to apply for a mortgage. I grew up in a home, my parents owned a home, but there was never really conversations about home ownership, right? I also, I have an education and I have college debt, school loan debt, and so there was a lot of conversations for me about what does that look like, right? And so it was the educational piece and learning about the debt to income ratio and learning about especially the 4-week piece about homeownership, because for me it was filled with anxiety about this process. For those who don't come up in the process, I often talk about it's learning a different language. And so for me, it was like entering into this foreign country and not knowing how to speak the language. And so knowing that you're coming in from a deficit, right, and having for myself, right, this deficit mindset already. And so the 4-week, so for the program, you attend an 8-week wealth building, and then you attend a 4-week home ownership that is really the nuts and bolts of, okay, there's a lender that comes in, and this is the process of applying for a mortgage. Go talk to people, right, and really helping build confidence. I needed that piece. I needed the permission, right, to shop around, because for me, it was like, I'm not a frequent flyer. My parents don't own multiple, my parents don't own multiple homes, right? I needed the permission to be able to ask these questions. And then it was like the vocabulary. This is what this means. And I think that for me and for the other people in my cohort, these were the essential pieces to really allow us to go in and speak the game. There were realtors that were associated with the class, and we could go through them or we could find our own. Again, with the mortgage lenders, we could use the folks that were associated with Ownit, or we could find our own. And then there were inspectors that came and they were like, this is what an inspection is. This is what you should look at. This is what an appraisal is, right? This is what you should look for. And then it was, all right, you've qualified. It's time to go out. And so my initial interest was this class really helped me think about what does becoming a multi a multi-unit property owner look like. I have a 10-year-old son who has a health issue, and so for me, it's like, what do I do to help ensure that he's stable for the rest of his life? And so that was my initial interest. I don't qualify for any other down payment assistance, and so the $15,000 really allowed me to build on my offer. I put in six different offers, and I was outbid every other time. And the $15,000 allowed me a little bit more, game, or a little bit more skin in the game, right? And I eventually had to shift my plan, and I bought a condo, a townhouse in Sun Prairie, and the ability to come home at night and own your own, right, is something, it's a peace of mind, which is key. I might get emotional.
It's okay.
Over the weekend,
Take your time.
I'm driving in the parking lot with my son, and he's looking at, right, a sign on the parking lot, and he's like, what's a HOA, right? And so to be able to, at 10 years old, explain, right, some of the vocabulary that I didn't grow up knowing, right, is key. So this program not only is about the education, right? It's not only about the wealth building. It's not only about the homeowner, right? It's also shifting the narrative to my 10-year-old son, right? Who at 10 years old now knows what an HOA is, right? Who now knows what a deed is, who now knows so all of the things that I'm learning, right? And so I think this program is I get tired of conversations about all of the injustices, right? Because I think we are at a place where we should know, right? But this program pushes it further because it's action. And I think that's key, right? So it was action for me, but it moves it a step further because it's action for the next generation, right? And so that is really what I am so grateful for, because it's changing the game. And it's changing the game for folks who haven't been able to play the game, right? It's changing the game for generations to come by partnering with one city, by choosing this school and choosing this population of people. And I'm eternally grateful, and my son is grateful, right? I think that's key. And it's also, it's starting a conversation, but it's also saying, all right, let's do something. And I think that is also key. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jody. And I'm probably a little biased, but I do very strongly believe that education, financial education, is as much a form of wealth as money, and that is a form of generational wealth and an asset that you pass on, as any other asset that you pass on. And I will fess up to it. My son's here right now, and he can probably tell you that we probably talk more about money in our home than the average home. So Jody, just know that you're doing your son a great service in giving him the tools to continue what you've done so far. And as much as we talk about the down payment grants, I think what I've heard, and tell me if you agree, Sarah and Tiffany, is some of the biggest value comes from that trust, the relationships that are built with the agents and lenders to have partners in this very opaque, murky, oftentimes, confusing process.
Yeah, when we do talk about generational wealth, a lot of times, yes, it's money, and it is the education, and it is connections. It's who you know is so key. Yeah. And people try and downplay that, but it's, who's in your phone.
No, there's no downplaying it. I mean, I went to business school, and I will tell you why, you can ask them why they went for the network, okay? So you think there's not value in that, you're fooling yourself.
And I do think that that's an important point too. As I mentioned earlier, this industry is incredibly white dominated. So what does it look like when Black and brown realtors and lenders are now entering into a fairly lucrative with a lot of opportunity, and they're told, here is your market. Here are the people you should be serving, the Black and brown community. What would it look like if white people actually hired people of color to serve and to help and to do that work to increase? Because when you're looking at the numbers, like that's just crazy. Like, you know.
Yeah, and
don't ask people
I
to
don't
do
know
that.
if folks have caught on, but there's a little bit of a double entendre in the name of the program. So Ownit refers not only to hopefully more families like Jody's actually owning their home, but also the industries kind of owning up to their responsibility historically to create the conditions and situations we're in, and also to have some agency in fixing things or turning things around.
Yeah, as a white person, my dad was in real estate growing up, and so when I would have to go and help him shovel his income properties and I was complaining about it, he would be like, this is gonna pay for your college. So for me to come out of college without student debt, that puts me in a better position to be able to purchase my first home, whether I'm using his money or not, right? Like when we look at the layers of how money is used and how opportunity impacts. So even though I'm like, oh, but I'm not doing anything wrong, I have benefited so much from how much racism has occurred within my industry. How can I not do something to right the wrongs? I'm not saying it personally, I was doing anything wrong. I'm not doing any guilt. I'm not doing any shame here. It's literally like, here's an opportunity to do something differently. Why wouldn't we? Just why wouldn't we?
All right, thank you. Maybe I'll turn it over now to Donna and share a little bit more about your involvement to date and in your journey.
My husband Tom, who's there, and we've just sold our house, which we lived in for about 35 years, our home in Tacoma. And we've moved to a newly built house in Verona. The house we lived in was about 100 years old. Now we're in a brand new house. So this is exciting. We're both in our late 70s and making the big move. We decided to get a smaller home. It's about half the square footage of our old one. And it's got about half the value too. So we're not building wealth quite the same way. We're trying to liquidate our wealth for needs that we're going to have in our old age. But while we were living in Tacoma, Tacoma's like a lot of new neighborhoods, like the Regent St neighborhood. It has a neighborhood newsletter, and we were startled to open up and read an article that actually was substantive as opposed to when was the neighborhood picnic. And this was an article that explained that in the neighborhood of Tacoma, which is proud of its history, the property deeds for about 50 years said that no property in Tacoma could be sold to a person or family that were persons of Ethiopian origin.
Okay.
And which was a sort of sophisticated way of talking about people of color. Tom and I were familiar with race-based home ownership and property transactions because we had lived and worked in Harrisburg, and Tom actually worked in Harrisburg with a community organization he started. The problem was identified as redlining, just right out there. But the organization he created was called CASH, Citizen Action to Save Harrisburg. It was kind of cute, right? So that was what we were doing. So we became familiar with how redlining could devastate a city, and it certainly devastated Harrisburg. So we were familiar with it, but we certainly never thought that Madison was a place where redlining happened. What did we know? This was not driving our choice to get another home. We just needed to get another home, and we needed a realtor, and Tom knew Sarah because they both served on the board at Badger Rock. Carlos came and met with us, and Tom, because he does this as a community organizer, he wanted to interview several realtors. So Carlos was one of several, and I don't even know how you picked out who we were going to interview, but when we met with Carlos, he introduced us to some of the things we needed to know about selling a house and buying a house. But we got valuable information from him about the value of our home. But in the course of that meeting, he told us about Ownit and about this effort to build Black wealth in this city. And I have to say that probably the idea of engaging a realtor with a social mission was more important to us than anything else we learned about what Stark was doing in our neighborhood or whoever else. So we asked Carlos if he would help us sell our house, and then we went through that horrible process of getting rid of everything you have, all of which ended up in various thrift shops. We discovered that nothing we had been saving from our grandmothers was of interest to anyone, so we just gave it all away and prepared to move to our new littler house. But during that process, our grandson lives with us. He's 17 now, or almost 17, but he's lived with us since he was an infant. And I found him one day in our living room crying. And he was crying about leaving and selling this house, which was the only home he had ever known. And I realized when I tried to understand him, you know, you always try to understand what upsets your kids, and I'm never as good at it as Jody is, but I realized that what he was experiencing was that he was giving up this house which reflected the privilege that he had acquired by being our grandson and living in this house and in that neighborhood, and that he was really frightened about what it was going to mean not to be there anymore. So that's the other part of the trauma of moving and going somewhere else, is not really understanding necessarily what the children in that household are going to experience. And this was very difficult for Malik, who's doing pretty well right now, although he's still pretty bossy. But understanding the transition that he was making as we sold this house was very important to us. We have, since we sold our house with Carlos very successfully, I've had the opportunity to speak in this church about our experience and about Ownit. And I actually got quite emotional too, so you're not the first one, Jody. But after that, I've had a stream of people who belong to this church, who mostly live in the neighborhood, who have come up to me and said, "What is the name of that group again that you are working with?" And they mean Ownit. And I said, well, just told them the little bit I know, which isn't even very much. And what I have gotten back as a response from these church members is, I want to be sure and write that down, because we're going to be selling our house one of these days, and we want to make sure that we go with Alvarado. And I said, well, that's a great thing to do, but actually you don't have to, because there are now other realtors involved, and I hope you'll talk about that. But yes, you certainly should plan on that. And actually, one of our older church members said she's putting it in her will, so that when she dies, her sons will know that she wants to be sure that they work with a realtor when they sell her house. That will
Be like that person, everybody.
Well, I'm here making my little pitch, because I think this is when people say, well, what can I do? It seems like a silly thing to do, but when you're doing planning at my age of 77, thinking about what you want to tell your kids about what you want is very important. And I think you'll, hopefully from this church and from other members of neighborhood churches who are watching us online, people will begin to realize that this ought to go into your estate planning. And some people know you have to give your money to public television, and that I agree with too, but I think this is a very good thing to think about in terms of what you do with your wealth to make it work not only for your family, but for the community. I think that's all I have to say.
Yeah, thank you so much, Donna. And you know, what she described in her experience is in fact one of the, what we think to be the innovative and novel pieces about Ownit, which is, you know, Sarah and I are both on the fundraising committee, in addition to her and our many other roles, but that's part of it. And really, we don't want the fundraising committee to always have to be fundraising. We want to move to this self-sustaining model, which is just to have Ownit capture some of the value in all of these home transactions. Think about the value in Dane County of properties changing hands in a year. Just imagine if every party in that transaction, the appraisal company, the lender, the buyer, the seller, the agent, the bank, the inspector, all were committed to donating a portion of the produce. Call it a, you know, I know tax is a bad word, but call it a tax on that to further this good. And so, you know, we didn't talk about it a lot here, but I know that that's a piece of what we're trying to do. So, Donna, you touched upon the other agents. Tiffany, I know you, all of the agents at Alvarado Group, and we have a whole network. It's on our website. You know, that's something that we want to grow and to better sustain the program in its current form.
Part of the reason for that is because this is an industry-wide issue. So when we have specific brokerages or banks who want to do something, in my mind, it's doing something. It's not a movement. So having Stark come on board as a participating broker and Century 21 and Keller Williams is so powerful. And that's where it can become a movement. And when we're talking to brokerages and banks, a lot of times they don't talk to each other. It's like you're not supposed to. It's like this sharky shark thing of like, oh, we should do this. And, you know, if we can, I mean, that's white supremacy culture right there. So like, where can collaboration really grow? Like, that's where when we see the vision of what's possible, we've gotten a significant amount of money from churches and neighborhood associations. Like Tiffany said, one of her clients, he gave $15,000. And part of the reason was he said, you know, I got my kids through college. They've got good jobs, and they both own homes already. So this is just a tiny piece of the wealth that I would have passed down to them. And he also, I think, made $50,000 more than he was asking when he was selling his house. Like, he wasn't expecting that much more money. This is redistribution of wealth in so many different ways. Like, yes, it should be a sustainable model, and at the same time, the community can really be a part of that too.
Yeah, and you know, as I think a couple of you have already said, Jody and Donna, you know, money talks. So if you're in a position to be a participant in this transaction, you know, ask those pointed questions. You know, do you support this work in your profession, in your brokerage? And that's where I think we can really, you know, have conversations with your neighbors, with your family members. You know, it doesn't just have to be, you know, in your will, have those conversations now, you know, while we're all still together to make your wishes known and to help make this, you know, come about for the wider community. So we are happy to take questions. You know, it may be a little bit challenging with the live stream audience to communicate those to Andy and then down to us. But if there are any questions from folks who are in the church right now, there is a microphone set up. We're more than happy to address them. And if there are any from Andy from above.
So we do have a couple of questions that have come through online. One viewer asks how you all came up with the $15,000 grant amount.
I can answer this, Andy. So the 15,000 originally came because I believe in 2020. So I work in investment manager. I'm a financial planner as well as a financial educator, and I'm quite familiar with some rules around taxation and gifting and things like that. And that is the amount that I believe it was in 2020 that anybody could gift to another person. Anybody, did not have to be any relation, every year without filing any kind of notification to the IRS or, reducing their estate tax exemption. It was essentially free money. You could give it to as many people as you want, but that was the threshold. You can give more money every year, just that above 15,000 in 2020, at least you had to report it to the IRS. And so knowing how often family money plays a role in home purchases, grandparents allowing their grandchildren to enter the real estate market, we thought that would be a symbolic amount, with the money coming from not necessarily the family, but the wider community, the wider family in the fullest sense of the word. So that is actually the origination of that amount. The federal gift limit is actually inflation adjusted, or will actually increase over time. So it's not 15,000 anymore, but that's where we started with that figure. Yeah, and we hope to also increase it. Funds being available, we hope to also match that amount to newer grantees.
Another viewer asked, you have 8 folks who have been able to purchase homes through your program. Are there other people who are making offers, bidding on homes, who are sort of in the pipeline, trying right now to purchase homes?
Yes, there's currently other participants that are trying to purchase homes right now. I'm working with one. We have another agent that's working with another. I think she's put in approximately 7 offers, but she hasn't been successful because she's being outbid. And we just had a graduating class as well, so they'll be looking for homes as well.
So we have 2 wealth building courses a year, and so there's 2 windows for the down payment grants to go out, and we raised, I'll just hold it. We raised $500,000 within a year and 4 months, or a year and 6 months, a year and a half.
Sorry, I didn't hear what
500,000.
Yeah.
Yep.
The majority of that goes toward the down payment fund, but of course we also have a fund for
Operating.
education, operating expenses, some administration. But we do also have a very engaged group of volunteers who help. So
anytime you see a link that is contributing, or a donation link, that all goes to the down payment fund, 100% of it.
yeah, we fundraise separately for the operating expense education piece.
Someone else online asked if there's a way that we can help, or that you're actively spreading the news about estate planning possibilities for folks to help support and sustain the work you're doing.
I would say we haven't focused necessarily on estate planning per se as
Andy, I think that's kind of an idea that's bubbled up here within the congregation. And I'm glad that we're providing that leadership for a really good idea. And you could probably tell me who it is that's thinking about that, because you know who it is who's busy planning.
We actually, the first check we got for seed money was a woman whose mother had sold her house and moved to Capitol Lakes, is that what it's called? And she, I think, gained like $300,000, and she had also read some books, and I think The Color of Law specifically, and she was like, this is unearned, unearned privileges here. Like, so she specifically asked for $40,000 to go towards Black homeownership, and when she passed, her daughter reached out to us, and that was, I have the goosebumps because, I mean, we were like, maybe we could raise $100,000 that first year. Like, we had no idea that the community would come out as strong as they did. And this was all during COVID, so we were Zooming with neighborhood associations. We had a group of 5 people in a neighborhood association give us $90,000. And they were pooling together through their different avenues of wealth. So estate planning is definitely, it's a huge possibility. And we're a 501c3, so it's very easy to be able to transfer.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be happy to talk about, estate planning to a group who's interested. I feel like everyone's going to cry here. I'm like, I'm not going to cry. I'm going to be the bulwark of tearing up. So,
I like to cry.
So that's something that definitely, there are people on staff who can help lead that conversation too, if you'd like to get in touch. But, part of it is too is just the thing about estate planning is we also just, it's kind of like that bias to action. We want to do things now before we pass this, You know what I'm saying? Like, there's a lot that can be done while we're still walking on this earth.
There's someone that we talked to through fundraising who his idea is to give a percentage of his property taxes to Ownit annually. Some people give monthly, but in his mind, he was like, this is my asset, and so that's how he's, playing with numbers. So I think it's what moves you, and how do you play with numbers, and you make it work. Like, when we decided how, the way we came up with what percentage to contribute to Ownit, we looked at what we contributed to charities, and we're sponsoring, we're doing all these realtors and lenders, they're always giving money, writing checks for galas, et cetera. So we basically just said, okay, what is that? What's the percentage of that? Let's just do that moving forward. It's possible.
Yeah. I think that's also why we like, to the property tax point, I think that's also why the actual transaction itself can be the point of the contribution, because, property tax, that's paper wealth. I always talk about it, where they value your house and they tell you, oh, it's worth this amount of money. And you're like, well, I didn't feel that. But, when you sell a home, that's when all of that paper value, that wealth on paper becomes wealth in reality. And I think is a good point where people are potentially more open to being generous, as so many of your clients have demonstrated.
So I'm curious, I know it's early in the process. You're still building your own framework of how you're going to, keep disseminating this and broadening it out. But if you were moving into a different city to try and apply this, let's say, so we can get this moving in other parts of the country, what are the critical things that are essential for this to be successful?
The people, the community. So this is very grassroots. So we would take Ownit and play out the toolkit. Like, here's how we did the down payment fund. Here's how we created the ambassador program for the sustaining funding. Here's how we created the education program. And then it's when a community, let's say Omaha or something, says, we want Ownit. All right, who's on your advisory team? Who within your community? Who are the lenders? Who are the realtors? Who are the community members that understand and can speak the stories? And then who are the Black and brown experts who are going to help with this education program? Because it cannot be white-led. There's so much whitewashing in financial literacy, and that has got to change. So it's creating that diverse community, and then it's easy. Well, it's not easy, but
I like what you're thinking with that question, though. There are redlining maps for just about every major metropolitan city in the U.S.
Yeah, and there's a lot of money out there.
This is the guy who started out his career, however many.
Harrisburg.
With cash, the Citizen Alliance to Save Harrisburg, which was to save Harrisburg from
Yeah.
redlining.
So I just have a comment to share from one of our viewers who said they want to put it in their will that their heirs will use realtors who are participating in this program. Someone else asked if you have a fact sheet somewhere that they can use to know how else to help. Lots of folks, and in this community we've talked about this, have things other than financial resources to bring to bear. So is there a way that we can do advocacy work? Is there a way that we can lobby with realty groups or with the state legislature to be helpful to the work that you all are doing?
I mean, yes to all of that. I think a little bit of the issue is, our personal capacity. We're all wearing multiple hats all the time. So I would say the first thing to do, we have some postcards here that we'll leave with you, Andy, for the parishioners and anyone else who are interested. But I would say the first thing is to just get in touch, join our mailing list, where we'll send out, I'm not going to commit to a timeline, but regular newsletters about our progress. And if you are interested, tell us what you're most interested in doing, and we will try and match you up with an advisory board or a committee that can best utilize your time and talents.
And I do believe we have a volunteer sign-up sheet on the website, so I can send that link to you, Andy, and have it available. But people can just email us as well.
Yeah.
Are you looking for specific ways people can help, or is that okay? Is that an answer?
Well, so eventually specific things, but when this community started to talk about how to participate, we identified our privilege, our power, and our resources, and know that we occupy space where our voices will be heard. We have people who can write grants. We have people who can lobby and manage letter writing campaigns. So we have a whole bunch of folks looking for ways to support by offering the things that we can bring to the table.
It is really helpful to use your connections within the real estate industry. So just what Grace said in terms of who do you know that's a realtor, a lender, a banker. You might not know a lender at the bank, but if you know the vice president of the bank, if they know about Ownit, part of it is exposure and trying to get in front of all of the people. So the more people that we have that can help do that, we've had like Summit Credit Union, they wrote a check. So maybe it's not their lenders are participating quite yet, but they're there, they want to, and the more people that are asking. So maybe it's a template email, like here's some people you could send this to. Those are some ideas.
And folks here all know that you all are wearing multiple hats, so not trying to make more work for you by asking how we can help, but legitimately wanting to be involved in some tangible and significant ways. So that would be great.
Thank you.
So another question someone has asked, you had 8 folks who have been able to purchase houses through your program. What would be a good year? And maybe that's driven by your capacity, but what would be a good year for you all as far as getting folks into houses?
I mean, I would have been thrilled if we'd gotten like one family in that first cohort.
Don't
so.
listen to her.
What?
To be honest, I've never thought about a good number because I think that when we first started, small numbers were big to us, and now we're thinking bigger. But I think that a great goal would be that every family that is associated with one city could be a homeowner. So, the whole entire school at one city.
That's a great goal. So how close are you to being sustainable without sort of one-time gifts from folks? If as you work other folks in the industry and they start to contribute some percentage of their proceeds from their work, how close are you to being able to do what you do? And I recognize the irony in saying that, because if you want to get everybody at One City Schools into a home, what does that take? But where are you in terms of a ratio between sort of one-time gifts and ongoing contributions?
Currently, 85% of the money that we've received has been from the community.
So
And
not from the self-sustaining.
not from the said, yeah, the movement that we're talking about within the real estate industry, that's a long game. I mean, the Realtors Association lobbied against the Fair Housing Act in 1968. They didn't apologize for that until 2020 after George Floyd was murdered. So people don't want to talk about it within our world. So it's a long game. However, we have a lot of people that do care and are pushing for it. And so I would say we're not close to that yet, but the vision is beautiful and possible.
We're lucky in that, I don't know if lucky is the right word, but so far we haven't had to turn away anybody from applying for a grant. Pretty much if a family feels that after going through the educational course, they're ready, they're wanting to move on, we've had the funds available. Part of that is there actually haven't been that many families who have qualified financially, even with the grant, to be in a position to own a home, and that is its own issue. But we've been able to support those who've wanted to move forward. So that's been good. But we do anticipate a point at which maybe we might run into an issue. And so that is some of the urgency behind the scenes to talk about how to devote more resources into that self-sustaining model, because I think that's really the flywheel that we want to get going.
So someone says that they have sent the postings about tonight's meeting to all of their realtor friends. And they're wondering how else they might lean on folks that they know who are in the real estate business.
If when you are emailing, if you could CC info@ownit.com, that helps, because then we can follow up with them as well. Just that double love. Did you have something, Jody?
In the process, I wondered how radical would it be if folks who learned about Ownit and saw my offer would give me the house or the income property because they knew that I was coming from Ownit instead of an investment, instead of a commercial investor. Right? And so I think that is another way that I've thought about how Ownit could change the game, right? By spreading the word, and how people who are supportive of this shift could support Ownit is you don't have to give up a cash donation, right? But when you're selling your home, and if you're aware of this program and you're working with a realtor and you see someone put an offer on your home and they're with Ownit, right, you could choose them. And how radical would that be? How that shifts the game, right? Then it's not just about the highest offer. It's about the most meaningful, right, choice and change for the family, for your neighborhood, right? That's impact also.
So someone online asks if you're working with realtors outside of Dane County, or are you just working in Madison?
It's open, and families can buy anywhere in Wisconsin. We actually had a family buy in Milwaukee. So this is where we're trying to not restrict. And obviously, for folks who want to be supporting locally, we haven't grown quite yet, but any realtor can contribute. There's a difference between that contribution that might be a one-time versus the systematic contribution that is consistent. However, at this point, once you're part of, I feel like sometimes it just maybe takes one time and then it can continue on. But we also had someone who was, when they would take their dog on a walk, and if there was a for sale sign, they would send an email to the listing agent and say, hey, I see you're selling in my neighborhood. I'm really passionate about building Black wealth or homeownership and equity within housing, have you considered, do you know about, are you an ambassador at, or even to take it a step further, if I looked and I saw you're not an ambassador yet at Ownit, here's some information about it. Honestly, that's grassroots. That's where change can happen. We have tried working within our associations, and
There's a lot of resistance.
we're gonna keep going.
And I just wanted to point out one thing, to what Jody was saying about, changing the game. Like, it's not just, like, some of you may not have property to sell anytime soon, right? Some of you might not be in a position to contribute in that particular way. But the kind of work we're doing comes in many different forms. Building Black wealth, and the class is called wealth building. It's not called, the first class is called wealth building. It's not called buying a home. So wealth building comes in many different forms, and building Black wealth comes in many different forms. So that dollar, how you utilize that dollar speaks volumes. So one way is through Ownit here, but there are many other ways to do so, and I would just encourage, to think about what your dollar is doing and how it's speaking on your behalf, and whether that matches how you want it to speak and how your values, how we spend our money is how we express our values.
A budget is a moral document. Jody, I just want to tell you that somebody was cheering for you after your last piece and said, "Well said," with several exclamation marks. Someone else has asked if you've been able to work with families that might be able to purchase a home through the Section 8 home buyers program.
Okay, so I work with a couple participants that are in the actual program. Right now, the program is suspended because they don't have enough staff. So that program has been suspended for approximately a year or more. So no, the Section 8 home buying program. So we have not worked with any participants that have Section 8, but if that program starts back up, we would be more than happy to work with them.
So someone, and so I'm going to put parentheses around this, someone asks if you have email templates that people could use to work and advocate on your behalf, and then I'm going to close that parenthesis and say, can we help write them?
Yes. Yes.
Because we don't want to give you all more work to do. We would like to be able to help you. So
Yes to both.
Resounding yes to all of it.
So I just want to encourage, if you're watching online, you can add things to the chat, or you can, if you know me, you can text me or email me. I'm getting these questions from both of those places. So this is my question. You all have used the vision dream and vision several times. And Tiffany, you said a dream would be to have everybody at one city home or one city school in their own homes. 5 years from now, what would make you smile, make you do the happy dance?
Well, if I'm dreaming big, I would really like the federal government to address race-based funding around homeownership and create that for other down payment funds. So that's one of my big dreams. I think in terms of Ownit, what we can do as we're showing how critical it is to not have these restrictions. And I think like what Jody was talking about, even you being able to pick whatever realtor, whatever lender you want, when you can use this money if you don't make enough money, but yet to be a homeowner, you should probably be making enough money so that you can have it so that it can build wealth and create equity. To have these, it doesn't make sense. So that showing how what we do can impact the local community, if that can change some of the restrictions on these bigger programs, because there is so much money in these down payment assistance programs, that would be awesome. And then obviously if we could create some more opportunities outside of one city, beyond one city, and be able to partner with other organizations so that more Black and brown families have access to the funds that we are accumulating. What's your dream, Tiffany? Dream it.
To piggyback off of Sarah, my dream would be to go national. Another dream would be to not have a need for this program any longer. Another dream of mine would be for the federal government to step up and change some of the laws behind lending and some of the restrictions in regards to down payment assistance in general, right? This program was created partially because of that. So if we're really trying to get people into homes, why are we making them jump through hoops and consistently restricting them? So I know that's a long game, but I know it can be done.
So I think maybe I just heard a reference to redlining by another name. How is redlining an ongoing problem, just in different forms, under a different guise today?
I mean, now we have zoning, you know. That's an issue. We have the definition of family and who can reside at certain places. That's an issue. So I think we continuously knock down walls, and more walls are built up with different definitions and different meanings. So if we have some type of regulation behind this, I think it can be changed. But if we can collaborate with other people and other officials and other organizations, I think that we can move mountains. But it has to be all of us. It just can't be one person in, one person out. We know that what has been done is wrong. Numbers don't lie. They're there. So why is everybody fighting this?
We talk about modern day redlining, and so we talked about the policies, but there are practices that happen. So sometimes you'll, specifically with real estate and with realtors and lenders, we're commission-based. So I make a lot more money when I sell a $500,000 house than when I sell a $200,000 house, and I do the same amount of work. So it's very common to hear realtors say, here's my target market, it's this neighborhood, it's this price range, I don't work with down payment assistance programs, it's too much work, it's too hard. That's a practice, and that's not an equitable practice. So I did this, because these are the models we were taught. I literally was taught, you wanna sell fewer houses for more money so you don't have to work as hard and you make more money, and that's how you do it. And this is, they teach it to you. So it wasn't that it was something that was supposedly bad to do because it's being taught, but when you understand who is buying $200,000 homes, primarily people of color. So if your seasoned realtors are only working with 500,000 plus or 800,000 plus, whatever, who's working with 200,000 plus buyers, it's brand new agents who will work with anyone who really don't know what they're doing. You only need 72 hours of education to get your real estate license. That's real low. So there's a huge issue in terms of service. I totally forgot the question. Modern day redlining. The practices, I get so worked up about this, but the practices, because again, it's like, what would it look like to have a balanced book of business? What would it look like if the real estate industry and the lending industry, what would it look like if banks were actually supporting the lenders who were serving the clients who were first-time home buyers who were only buying a property that was $250,000? Whereas if, you closed $1 million, like what if we were to shift that? And there's still steering, and there's still this, and there's still that, and there's still a lot of things. Yeah. If you're
not just even in the home buying process, even after the home buying process, if you're then going to sell a home. We just had an event where Ownit sponsored a showing of the movie Lowballed, where I want to talk about this, where they get into the appraisal process. and how if an appraiser comes into a home and it looks like a black family lives there, what happens to the appraisal? They're going to sell a home. They're trying to get a high appraisal to justify the sales price. And what does that do? That can wipe hundreds of thousands of dollars from a family's balance sheet, net worth, from that practice, to use Sarah's term.
And to piggyback off of what Sarah was saying, I think that, I work with everyone. I don't have a specific, I only work with somebody who wants a $500,000 house. But more and more and more when I do this work, like this morning, I spent literally 2 hours on the phone this morning from people calling me saying, hey, someone gave me your number because you're affiliated with Ownit and I want to know how I can own a home, right? So like I'm taking these calls all morning and then I'm trying to work on my regular work all afternoon and then I'm working on Ownit at night. It's like, but we have agents who are like, we're not doing that. We're not answering your questions. We don't work with down payment assistance. We don't see me with your pre-approval or your cash and that's it. Like we're doing the work and we're doing a job.
There's a lot that has to change. I work in financial planning, and it's the same model, right? You have to have, at my firm, you have to have $500,000 in investable assets just to have somebody talk to you. And who needs financial planning? Everybody. Actually, probably more if you have fewer resources, right? Because you got a smaller cushion. You have a smaller safety net, but you have to change the mindset of, why am I in this work? What am I trying to do? Am I living my values? I have also forgotten the question. Did we answer anything? Redlining, that's right.
But
yes.
I think that's really valuable because that's our experience, right? So when Black and brown folks, before I found my realtor, that was my experience, right? And the only reason why I went with my realtor is because someone that I trust, someone that also went to one city, went on Facebook and said, people are asking me how I, became an investment property owner, and this is how I did it. This is who I worked with. Because the person that I called initially was like, yeah, no. This is what you got to do. Call me when you get a pre-approval, da-da-da-da-da. But all of the questions that we have, we don't understand the process, we need help, we don't get the time, right? And then when you go, I've had an experience when I went with a friend of mine who was looking, and somebody came in and they're looking at the property, oh, look at this. The realtor was it was 1,000 miles a minute going through, this is what you should look at, this is what you should look at, this is what you should look at. And for someone who this is their first rodeo, right, it's super overwhelming. And it's can I record you because I have no idea what you just said. I need to Google half of the terms that you just used because I don't understand. And this is your probably 10th home that you've done today. Well, this is my first time ever doing this. So I want to make sure that I don't buy something that's going to fall apart. Right, so I think helping people, my full-time job is working with people who are learning this industry, right, and educating people from the ground up who are joining real estate. And I think that's key, is helping folks who are coming for the certificate, right, and teaching them about Ownit and teaching them about the history. I think we've got to change them and inform them from the beginning, because if we want to change the whole thing, that's a key piece. And unless that's a part of the change that happens, it's going to continue to happen, and we're going to continue to get left behind. So that's a huge piece. It might not answer what his initial question was, but I think you brought up very important, a very important piece of the puzzle.
So shortly after St. Andrews started investigating these issues, it seemed like it got some serious airtime on the news. There were stories about whitewashing and appraisals, and it seemed like every time we opened the Washington Post or the New York Times or the Atlantic magazine, there were stories talking about the same issues that you all are talking about. I'm wondering if you feel like there's enough airtime for this. If you recognize that sort of moment in the last year and a half, or if it's still going on, how much attention is this getting?
I mean, I recognize it. I read it probably daily. We're always watching clips in regards to people that were wrongfully, I don't know, discriminated against. But I think there has to be continuous airtime and things in your face, because if it's constantly in your face, then maybe somebody will finally do something, right? So since COVID, we've been doing this, and yes, we've raised over $500,000, but if we are constantly preaching this and promoting this and educating this, we should have well over $1 million, right? So I think that, yes, we need to continuously shout, help us, spread the word, come on board, something.
If anybody knows like Mackenzie Scott, we'll take a call from.
I think what's hard for me and when I first started learning, it was overwhelming. Like I said earlier, I don't know, I'm just a realtor. How do I desegregate a neighborhood? How do you change something that's so embedded, entrenched? Yeah, so I think if there are more stories that don't just point to the problem, but also show where change is possible, I'm sick personally of seeing the stories that only talk about the problem, because there are ways to make change. You do see it happening. We have had clients who didn't necessarily take the highest offer because that was a cash investor who was going to flip it, and that's like, I mean, not everyone's going to do that, but if there are some people who will do that. Also, how to simplify it. I struggle with how much we get into the weeds, like with zoning, when you start to really understand the details, but to take the time to learn the details, that's a lot to ask, people who aren't working in it every day. So if anybody knows how to take complicated issues and make them more appealing to and able for people to, really sink their teeth into, that would be really helpful. Because we all talk the language, and so sometimes it's like, wait, hold on, how much are we in the weeds, and where can we continue to connect with people in a way that it impacts them too?
So I think that was the last question that we've gotten online. We're down to about 8 minutes left. Do you all have closing statements that you'd like to make?
I kind of want to read a letter that we got from someone who donated. It'll take me a little bit to find it, but can I do that? That letter from Kristen? Okay, I'll look for it.
I vacillate, as Sarah looks for that letters. I go back and forth between, this is work that we enjoy doing. I love working. I love teaching. I love working with Tiffany and Sarah on these things. But I very much, even saying that, I very much vacillate between feeling very excited about the 8 families. I show up for every closing ceremony I can make it to. I've got balloons. It's like the best. That's the best hour. That's the power hour right there, being part of the hype squad. But at the same time, I also sometimes feel very pessimistic because it's America. And what's the currency of America? Is money. And a lot of money is being made from people keeping them renters, keeping them poor, keeping them in a place where they are unable to build wealth, unable to build their own, okay, now I'm gonna cry. Unable to build, the safety net to protect their family. And so, I think it's challenging, and, but at least you're, doing something, chipping away at that, taking your God-given talents to try and try and make a difference. So I don't want to stop doing that, because I think if you give in to not thinking you can change things, then that's really the end of it. So.
Would you want, okay, I did find it. Okay, I'll read it. Okay.
Would you like to introduce the letter?
The letter is from Kristen, who contributed after she sold her property. Well, I'll just read the letter because she talks about what she does. So, Dear Ownit, 9 years ago, I began exploring the possibility of homeownership. I was working 3 low-wage jobs. I had no savings, but met a lender who went to bat for me. She acquired 3 separate down payment assistant loans, which made it possible for me to purchase a very small house on the east side of Madison. 1 year later, my One City Scholar was born in this sweet home. In May, I decided to merge households with my partner. As I realized what the sale of my house would mean for me, elimination of my student loan debt, equity in my new house, plus money in the bank, I knew that I could not make a deposit in my account without giving a portion of my net proceeds to your organization. Because while I faced significant economic hurdles before building equity, the privileges my whiteness has afforded me, not only as I navigated my first mortgage approval, but throughout my entire life and lineage, is undeniable. In fact, privilege is too soft a word, because my family's privilege, granted through settler colonialism, is built upon theft, violence, exploitation, and exclusion. This is not a donation. This is a tiny step toward repair. I personally benefit every day from the culture and resilience of Black communities, and as I settle into my beautiful new home, situated in a historic neighborhood where my great-grandparents settled 100 years ago, my commitment to reparations and visionary community development feels more rooted and expansive than ever. Thank you for the work that has gone into this pilot program. I hope to continue conversations with you about its growth. With humility and gratitude, Kristen Ford.
Drop the mic.
Yeah. Do you have final words?
Yeah, I'm going to get emotional from that letter.
Right?
Because I know Kristen. Yeah. I think for me, the idea of really buying a house came when, participating in conversations about picking school districts of where you want your kids to go to school. And I, understood what that means, but the power of picking, and having the economic power to pick, by purchasing a home in a neighborhood, was something that, when I finally realized, what that would take, blew my mind. And I wasn't at the point where I could do that for my kid. And everybody deserves the right? Every child deserves the right, One City schools or not, to every parent. Why should I go to bed at night, Because I don't have the economic power to say, this is where I want my child to go to school, so I'm gonna buy a home there, And that's really what kind of shifted for me, because I wanted to be able to provide that. And I was renting, And money could only go so far, in rent in this city. And hearing sirens, wasn't something that I wanted for my kid. And so this program, helps set folks up for this, And so listening to this conversation and acting, as a result of this, in whatever way you choose to act, helps to ensure that every parent, every mother, every father, and every child, has that opportunity.
Close it out, Grace.
I think we're done. Anyway, thank you.
We've had a couple of mic
Andy.
drops there. So a couple of folks have asked online if this will be recorded, and I just want to be able to answer them yes.
Yes.
So you can click on the same link that you clicked on to get here tonight and view the recording. Tomorrow, when it becomes available, I'll edit out the half an hour of the intro screen that was on there. And so a cleaner version of it will show up. And then I'll make that available to you all so that you can download it and use it however you want.
That'd be great. Thank you.
So on behalf of the folks here at St. Andrews, I want to thank you all very much for the work that you're doing, the vision and the dream that you hold out for all of us to aspire to, and especially for coming here this evening and offering your time to help move us along in this journey and this process. And we all look forward to walking this path with you and doing anything we can to help support you in your work. So thank you.
Thank you, Father Andy.